Welcome! In this lesson, we're going to learn about the passive voice. We use the passive voice when the action is more important than the person who does it. Let's look at this example. In the active voice, we say, Tom wrote the letter. Here, Tom is the subject, and we focus on who did the action. In the passive voice, we say, the letter was written by Tom. Now, the focus is on the letter, not Tom. The basic formula is subject plus be plus past participle, or V3. For example, the window is opened. Remember, in the passive voice, we focus on the action, not the doer. Also, the object of the active sentence becomes the subject of the passive sentence. Let's continue and learn how to use the passive voice correctly. We use the passive voice in many situations. The action is the important part, not the person who does it. Let's look at the 5 most common situations. First, when the action is more important than the person. For example, the cake was baked yesterday. We focus on the action, baking, not on who baked it. Second, when we don't know who did the action. For example, my bike was stolen last night. The person who stole the bike is unknown. Third, when the person isn't important. For example, the garbage is collected every morning. The important information is that the garbage is collected, not who collects it. Fourth, to be polite or more formal. For example, you are requested to remain seated. We often use the passive voice to sound more polite and respectful. Fifth, in news, reports, and instructions. For example, the meeting will be held tomorrow. The passive voice is commonly used in news, notices, and official instructions. Remember, passive voice helps us speak and write more clearly and professionally. Now let's learn how to make the passive voice. The basic formula is subject plus be plus past participle, or verb 3. Remember, the subject in the passive sentence is the object of the active sentence. First, choose the correct form of be. Then, use the past participle, or V3, of the main verb. Let's look at some common tenses. Present simple. Am, is, or are plus past participle. Example, the window is opened. We use this for actions that happen now or usually happen. Past simple. Was or were plus past participle. Example, the room was cleaned. We use this for actions that happened yesterday or in the past. Present continuous. Am, is, or are being plus past participle. Example, the homework is being finished. This shows an action that is happening right now. Present perfect. Has or have been plus past participle. Example, the report has been sent. We use this for actions that have already happened or have just been completed. Future simple. Will be plus past participle. Example, the meeting will be held. This is used for future actions. Remember these 3 important points. Passive voice uses be plus the past participle, or V3. The object of the active sentence becomes the subject of the passive sentence. And by plus the person is optional. We only include it when it is important to say who did the action. Finally, remember, passive voice is all about the action, not the doer. Now let's learn when to use the passive voice. We use the passive voice in different situations. Let's look at the reasons and the examples. First, we use the passive voice when the action is more important than the doer. For example, the trophy was awarded yesterday. The important information is that the trophy was awarded, not who awarded it. Second, we use the passive voice when the doer is unknown. For example, my bicycle was stolen last night. We don't know who stole the bicycle. Third, we use the passive voice when the doer is not important or not necessary to mention. For example, English is spoken in many countries. The important fact is that English is spoken there, not who speaks it. Fourth, the passive voice is common in formal writing, reports, and academic writing. For example, the experiment was carried out carefully. This style sounds more formal and objective. Fifth, we often use the passive voice in news reports and announcements. For example, the new bridge was opened last week. The report focuses on the event rather than the people involved. Now let's learn some common past participles, also called verb 3 or V3. In the passive voice, we always use the past participle or V3 of the main verb. Let's read these common verbs together. Write becomes written. Make becomes made. Eat becomes eaten. See becomes seen. Do becomes done. Build becomes built. Next. Buy becomes bought. Take becomes taken. Speak becomes spoken. Drive becomes driven. Give becomes given. Know becomes known. Next. Read becomes read. Notice that the spelling stays the same, but the pronunciation changes. Hear becomes heard. Write becomes written. Think becomes thought. Stand becomes stood. Ring becomes rung. Finally, find becomes found. Teach becomes taught. Send becomes sent. Pay becomes paid. Show becomes shown. Grow becomes grown. Remember these 3 important points. Passive voice always uses V3. Many irregular verbs change their form, so you need to learn them one by one. And the best way to remember them is to learn and practice V3 every day. Here's one more tip. Look at the verb in the sentence. Change it to V3 to make the passive voice. Now let's look at some real-life examples of the passive voice. These are examples of passive voice in everyday English. Listen carefully and repeat after me. Number 1. The letter was written by my sister. Here, the focus is on the letter being written, not on who wrote it. Number 2. English is spoken in many countries. We focus on the fact that English is spoken around the world, not on the people who speak it. Number 3. The cake was made by my mom. The important information is that the cake was made. The action is the main focus. Number 4. The thief was caught by the police. In this sentence, we focus on what happened. The thief was caught. Number 5. The report was submitted yesterday. We focus on the action of submitting the report, not on the person who submitted it. Number 6. The homework was finished before dinner. The important point is that the homework was finished before dinner. Remember these 3 key ideas. We use the passive voice in many real-life situations. The action is the focus, not the person. And always use the correct form of be with the past participle or V3. Finally, passive voice helps us speak and write clearly, politely, and professionally. Now let's look at some common mistakes in the passive voice. Learn these mistakes and avoid them. Number 1. The wrong sentences. The book was right. The correct sentence is, the book was written. Remember, after be, we always use the past participle or V3. Number 2. The wrong sentence is, the room cleaned yesterday. The correct sentence is, the room was cleaned yesterday. Don't forget to use was before the past participle. Number 3. The wrong sentence is, the cake is made here. The correct sentence is, the cake is made here. Again, use the past participle, not the base verb. Number 4. The wrong sentence is, the homework has finished. The correct sentence is, the homework has been finished. In the present perfect passive, we use has or have plus been plus the past participle. Number 5. The wrong sentence is, the report will send tomorrow. The correct sentence is, the report will be sent tomorrow. In the future passive, we use will be plus the past participle. Remember the passive voice formula. Be plus past participle or V3. Now let's compare active voice and passive voice. Both active and passive voice are correct. We simply use them in different situations. Let's look at these examples. Example 1. In the active voice, we say, Tom wrote the letter. The focus is on Tom, the person who did the action. In the passive voice, we say, the letter was written by Tom. Now the focus is on the letter, the thing that received the action. Example 2. Active voice. They built the bridge. Passive voice. The bridge was built by them. Again, the passive voice focuses on the bridge, not on the builders. Example 3. Active voice. Someone stole my bike. Passive voice. My bike was stolen. In this sentence, we don't need to say who stole the bike. The action is more important. Example 4. Active voice. People speak English here. Passive voice. English is spoken here. The passive voice emphasizes the language, not the people who speak it. Remember these important points. Use the active voice when the doer is important. Use the passive voice when the action or the object is more important. And remember, by plus the person is optional in passive voice. Finally, practice both voices so your English will sound natural and flexible. Let's review what we learned about the passive voice. First, the structure. The passive voice uses object plus the correct form of be plus the past participle or V3. You can also add by plus the agent if you want to say who did the action. Remember, we always use the past participle or V3 of the main verb. Next, when do we use the passive voice? We use it when the action is more important, when the person who did the action is unknown, or when the person is not important. Now, let's review some common tense patterns. Present simple. Is, am, or are, plus V3. Past simple. Was or were, plus V3. Future simple. Will be, plus V3. Present perfect. Has or have been, plus V3. What about by plus the agent? We use by plus the person to say who did the action. However, it is optional in many passive sentences. Here are some common past participles. Write becomes written. Make becomes made. Build becomes built. Speak becomes spoken. Give becomes given. Finally, one important reminder. In the active voice, we say, they build the bridge. In the passive voice, we say, the bridge was built. Notice that the object in the active sentence becomes the subject in the passive sentence. Great job! Thank you for learning with us. See you in the next lesson.